Hey game makers! Port. A more or less one-to-one version thrown haphazardly onto other systems with little to no changes or additions. Remake. A recreation of the game from the ground up containing most of the same content, but in a new style, or with some new content added in, like extra cutscenes, items, or mechanics. Remaster. Another ground up recreation, but done from a slightly different perspective. Content is largely the same, but done in a new way to keep things fresh, usually includes story rewrites, altered content, and new plot lines. And a lot of new details and mechanics. Reimagining. Taking a game and asking, now what if this game that we know and love was completely different? And whatever this mess was supposed to be. I've always been a fan of those 10 years ago and now kind of drawings, because I think it's nice to compare your new and your old work, just to see how far you've come. Then compare it to someone else's work and realize you've still got a long way to go. A lot of people have a vested interest in their old projects and recreating them with their current skills. Some people have been bouncing around ideas in their heads for years and just haven't been able to gamify them yet. With the release of GMEM, Gaia's Melody, Echoed Melodies, this was my first official remake. Even the original was a reimagining of my first game attempt. Let's call that Crab GM0. And we're never talking about that square-roomed terror again. So, if you've ever thought about revisiting a project from your past, I thought I might go over some of the major changes I made to GMEM, why I made them, and give you an idea of what to look for if you're planning to do any sort of whatever. Learning how to self-edit is key in any creative field, so doing any sort of recreation, taking a cold hard look at what you had and finding ways to improve it is a surefire way to test your skills. Quick note, the changes listed here go far beyond fixed all bugs and typos and made pretty graphics. Cause that's all a given. More Choco! Choco was a character introduced in GM, and in GM2 was promoted to a playable character. Looking back, I've got absolutely no idea why I didn't end up making her a playable character from the start. She's just so cool! In the original, she had her own little plotline, but it was incredibly disjointed and sort of stopped 1/3 through the game and started up again near the end, then sort of vanished. My original intention was to have her follow the player around on her own most of the game, but this was sort of cut in the original, cause when you rush to make a game in 2 months, these things done happen. With the introduction of her Master Usa persona, the idea of her following the player is much more apparent here, and gets her way more screen time, and even gets to battle with you, and oh my gosh, I just love her so much more now. I really wanted to bring her back as a playable character here, but to keep continuity with GM2, I just couldn't. Luckily, she managed to work her way into at least a few boss fights, so hey Choco! Hey Choco! My voice! Party dialogue. As I've learned from making GM2, I really like writing character dialogue. So much so, I swear that's what half that game is. This isn't nearly as bad as GM2, but I did try to include some party dialogue. That is to say, when the player gets their choice of party members, the party still holds mid-cutscene conversations here and there. One of my biggest gripes in most old games is that all of the party members fighting together that are out to save the world really don't talk to each other at all outside of plot-heavy cutscenes. And even then, you start letting the player choose the party, you've got a big mess of the hero is the only one who says anything anymore. So, for the most part, I wanted to make sure the other 3 party members were actually included more often than not within cutscenes. Atmosphere and mapping. Something I've always been particular about was scene atmosphere. If the universe is sad, make it dark and rainy. If we're happy, make it sunny and saturated. This is something I tried to expand on in the remaster. One of the biggest additions, and something I love for some reason, is adding sort of a mist look to the dark areas of the game when it's rainy or just clouded. That and actually changing some of the game music to be less atmospheric. One of the best examples is Cave 1. First cave is so boring and dreary and bleh. So in addition to making the cave less obnoxiously boring, I added in a much more upbeat and adventure-y song. because when your cave is making you feel bored, you know there's a problem. A lot of other areas, particularly the boring cave dungeon types, got a similar treatment. They were all redesigned to be more interesting and less tedious, and actually fun to navigate through. What a concept, right? Plus mini-maps for most of them. One certain mind-numbingly dull cave from the original got turned into a single cave library map, and it just ended up working so much better. And I got it to work with the plot. It's nice when things work out. Less skills. Okay, so one thing I heard a lot for the original GM is, why are there so many skills? There are too many skills. Why are there so skills? I mean, most of my characters are mages, and mages have magic, so... Even I agree it had way too many redundant skills. So this time, the number of skills was reduced to just a few interesting ones. This meant some characters got crazy nerfed, and others got surprisingly useful. Catchy. I also got to take advantage of MB's skill types, so it was helpful being able to organize, say, all of Akira's collectible piano skills into their own window. If there's one thing I can say about the new skills, it's that they're fun. Hilariously nonsensical sometimes, but fun. Cutscenes! GMEM utilizes two cutscene styles. An overworld one where I zoom the camera and text boxes all over the place, and what I've been calling anime-styled cutscenes, using full-art character images to play out cutscenes that would otherwise be more or less standing still and talking about the plot. Funny enough, these are both things I've actually wanted to do for years. They let me have a much more cinematic approach to scene design in 2D, and that's something I've always loved in games. The anime cutscenes were actually something I originally did for the old terrible GM0 game I said I wouldn't mention again. Though back then, it was basically Cloud from FF7 thrown over a random picture from Google, but hey, that's how 10-year-olds pretend they know what they're doing. Ugh, the cringe is real. The style used here, though, is more based on Bravely Default, and I imagine is much less work with 3D models. But I'm still really happy with how it turned out, and I'll likely expand on this type of scene in the future. End dungeons. Okay, so I mentioned the original was a rush project made in like 2 months. The original end areas were 100%, I literally have to finish this today, so I'm throwing whatever ideas come to mind until it's done. The problem became I had a hard time thinking of how to make them better. I just knew that what I had done wasn't very good. Without going into spoiler territory, I ended up changing the second last dungeon to a completely different area. Unfortunately, I was really sick while working on it, and after looking at it again, it's still just kind of meh. So I turned it into more of a short passage instead of a dungeon, and revamped the final dungeon itself to be more interesting. And smaller. Still too big, but smaller. Monsters! Monsters, not my strong point. That being said, up until now I've just used monster graphics I found online. This time, I made them! I received some great words of wisdom. Quote, if you're having trouble drawing monsters, draw them as cute anime girls. And wouldn't you know, it worked! Making monsters cute! I miss really obvious concepts sometimes. That being said, all of my monsters ended up kind of being designed with a bit of a cute factor. Or creepy. Or both. The only monster that was truly brought back completely was the monkeys, which were the only monsters I really designed in the original. Go figure. Doing the monsters myself actually prompted me to include an enemy book in the menu, so I could randomly talk about all of them. Still not my favorite part of game design, but I'm at least happy that most of the monsters actually fit in with the same art style. They also got revamped skills and stats, but that kinda comes with the remake territory. Reworking the story. There were a lot of things in the original I wanted to include that ended up being cut. Unfortunately, a lot of these ideas ended up being used for Guy's Melody 2, another epilogue, and that left me with quite the confusion on what I wanted to include in GMEM. I still ended up going more or less with my original ideas, but reconstructed them into something better suited for this game. One big one is a girl called Nora. In the original, she's just kind of there. Just there. She lives at a magic school, which is also just kind of there. I originally wanted to have a whole sequence of events at this magic school, but that ended up being used for GM2. So instead, I focused on Nora and made her more of a focal point for the area. She also joins you on a quest later, instead of just telling the player where to go to do the thing. Something I really tried hard to do with GMEM was breathe more life into the characters that were important, but got kinda shafted in the original. Specifically, Nora, Choco, nameless cat girl person, and to a lesser extent, Isha, Tsuwa, Echo, Shizuka, and Honoka, a GMEM exclusive character, all got much more impactful dialogue. Even Ferric, and you all should know how I feel about Ferric at this point, even Ferric became a character I ended up liking this time. The other main huge change was just the overall attempt to make things clearer. I originally had to skip over a lot of explanation and content I wanted to add in, such as pretty much everything involving a character called Zephyr. Again, gone into much greater detail in GM2, sort of lost in intentions in the original. A good deal of revamp went into the Merrick area, and who, what, and why Zephyr is gets more explanation. And even got a few cutscenes added in to round it all out. It was one of the things I feel I fell really short on in the original, so I'm much happier with this rendition. Also, I got more chances to draw Akira being adorable, so yay! New/changed features. Original GM was lacking in features. It was basically default with Mode 7 and an ATB thrown in, ironically both features removed from GMEM. Besides the obvious graphical overhaul to the menu, scene layouts, and cutscenes, the game includes some new features, some more obvious than others. The game returned to turn-based, part because MV doesn't play friendly with ATBs, and part I'm just not really into active time battle systems anymore. I did, however, add Unleashed mode, which is basically a poor man's trance. Raises all of your stats for a few turns, and that's about it. Wasn't really feeling limit break skills, nor how overdrive was used in GM2, so unleash! Characters also run around the battlefield instead of just standing in place like clueless, crazy people. As far as the overworld goes, hitting R will now change your party leader, and L will zoom in when indoors, revealing shinies of items and extra texty things. Also, you can turn left, right, and jump off ladders, if that counts as a feature. There's also the menu text, which is all new thought text which shows in the menu for the lead character, and updates basically every time you breathe. Okay, every time there's a plot point. Some of it's character development, some of it's random info, and some of it's just pure bloody chaos. Other minor new features include collecting and changing your window skin, adjusting the encounter rate, changing how messages appear, and a handful of other little things like that. Ending. The ending. Gonna talk about the ending here, so spoilers! You good? Okay, we good. The game has 3 endings, good, bad, and true, all listed with how to get them in the Ultimate Guidebook on Steam, in itch. I actually ended up changing the overall tone of the true ending. I won't go into details, but it's sad. The credits play, and it's still kind of sad. There's just sadness everywhere. Now don't get me wrong, I like feeling sad. I like feeling sad in games. But I wanted to end on a more upbeat tone, so instead of a quieter, somber end credit sequence where the camera pans back like it owns the place, we get a new sequence of saying goodbye to all our friends and party members and taking them back to their homes. I love when games do this, and if I could remember where I got this from, I'd tell you. To me, this ended up being a much more enjoyable ending to watch. The other 2 endings have their changes too, but they're minor in comparison. These changes were all done to enhance the overall experience, and I can honestly say, barring a few missed typos and pixels here and there, this game ended up being 100% what I wanted it to be, and I'm just overjoyed I was able to work on it at all. Though saying that, everything that could go wrong on this project did. I had files get corrupted from a power outage, the program crashed writing mid-cutscene a few times, computer B-sodded while saving a parallax map and I had to redo it, random bugs that took forever to figure out. But all in all, it was really fun to revisit 12-year-old Akira and friends again. And I think that's all for now. If you're interested in Guy's Melody, any of them, you can pick up the latest one on Steam or download the older ones at echoedgames.com. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later, gamers!